Another shooting by a white police officer in the St. Louis area leaves another African-American man dead. This is Special Report. Good evening. I'm John Robertson for Brett Baer. This Christmas Eve, a time of the year generally devoted to peace and goodwill, is instead tonight seeing displays of violence and hatred over the issue of how police do their jobs. Tensions continue in New York City after Saturday's murder of 2 NYPD cops. And the St. Louis area is once again under tremendous pressure after the third fatal shooting of a black suspect by a white police officer since the Michael Brown killing back in August. Police say they have proof the man in this case pointed a gun at the officer. Senior correspondent Rick Leventhal is in New York tonight with our top story.
Another police officer kills another 18-year-old black man in Missouri, drawing an angry crowd of some 200 to 300 people who threw bricks, rocks, and some kind of explosives at cops gathered at the scene. But despite being just a few miles from Ferguson, local authorities say there's no comparison between this incident and the death of Michael Brown.
When I got there, we were all saying the same thing. Here's a white policeman killing a black young man. So when does this stop? And I can assure you that did not happen last night.
Surveillance cameras at the gas station captured the moment the suspect, Antonio Martin, and another man approached the officer responding to a shoplifting call. You can see Martin take a step back, pull a 9mm handgun, and point it at the 6-year veteran, who pulls his own gun and fires 3 shots. The officer falls backwards, and a second angle shows the man who was with Martin running from the scene.
This is a tragedy for everybody, and our hearts certainly go out to the family of the decedent's family. But bad choices were made. You know, we didn't have the opportunity. This individual could have complied with the officer. He could have ran away. He could have dropped the gun. All sorts of things couldn't happen.
At least 4 people were arrested for assaulting police officers after the shooting. Some police cars were damaged and windows were broken at a gas station across the street. Antonio Martin's mother says as far as she knew, her son didn't own a gun.
They won't tell me nothing. His girlfriend told me that the police was messing with him. He was finna get up and run. When he was trying to get up and run, they started shooting him.
But police say Martin had been arrested numerous times on charges including assault and armed robbery, and the officer was in fear for his life. Missouri's governor released a statement saying the events in Berkeley are a reminder that law enforcement officers have a difficult and often dangerous job in protecting themselves and law-abiding citizens. In New York, demonstrators ignored Mayor Bill de Blasio's call to suspend protests after the assassinations of 2 police officers in Brooklyn, continuing to rally against what they call police brutality in the wake of the Ferguson shooting and the death of Eric Garner on Staten Island. And security has been beefed up at 2 precincts after reported threats from a Baltimore street gang called Black Guerrilla Family. The NYPD says it's investigated hundreds of online postings and possible threats and opened 40 investigations, resulting in 4 arrests so far. Cops on the street have been advised to remain vigilant and on guard for more possible attacks. John?
Rick Leventhal in New York tonight. Rick, thanks. President Obama has talked about greater efforts in the area of community policing as a response to these events. But it turns out the initiative has been a lot more talk than action. Correspondent Dan Springer is traveling with the president, who was on vacation in Hawaii.
When Ferguson, Missouri erupted into violence, civil rights leaders called for an overhaul of America's police departments. They pushed for more minority officers, better training, and the use of cop body cameras throughout the country. President Obama responded by forming a task force on 21st century policing.
I'm convinced that if we work hard, that we can make sure that police officers and the communities they serve are partners in battling crime, partners in making sure everybody feels safe, that we can build confidence and we can build trust.
But the answer could be in plain view and going either unused or misused. COPS, a Department of Justice program which stands for Community-Oriented Policing Services, is spending far less money than it used to, and according to critics, wasting money on drones and other technology.
The bottom line is that a lot of this program fails to have any kind of stewardship over it, and as a result, you have funds just being sent all over the place, being diverted, being misallocated, and no one is really taking responsibility for the distribution and the oversight of this program.
The COPS program spent $124 million last year, funding the hiring of 944 officers. Its goal was to dole out $1.8 billion to bring in more than 8,000 officers, and almost half the money went to just 6 states. One possible reason, many cities won't even apply for the grants because it will end up costing them more in the long run.
Remember, in some cases, they were saying that if you wanted to hire these police officers, you not only had to hire them and then commit to local funds, but if you then realized you couldn't afford it later, you had to pay back all of the money the federal government had given you, and it became an extreme burden.
According to an Inspector General report, since 2004, the DOJ has spent $3.7 million on drones. $1.2 million came out of the community policing budget. But many of the unmanned aircraft are gathering dust, and in Seattle, they even returned their drones over privacy concerns. We reached out to the Department of Justice and the COPS program for comment today, but with it being Christmas Eve, we never heard back. By the way, if you're wondering what President Obama is doing on this day before Christmas, he's playing golf with a couple of staffers and the Prime Minister of Malaysia. If you're keeping score at home, his 4th round of golf since getting here on Friday. John?
And a Merry Christmas to you as well, Dan. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, John.
Another laboratory mix-up at the Centers for Disease Control, only this time it was Ebola virus. At least one lab technician at the CDC in Atlanta may have been exposed to the Ebola virus after a mix-up in samples that were being transferred between laboratories. Instead of transferring vials of inactivated Ebola virus from a top biosafety level lab to a lower level lab, vials of live virus were sent out. The CDC spokeswoman says the vials intended for transfer were left in the wrong spot, and the vials of live virus were accidentally picked up. The CDC insists there was no possible exposure outside the secure laboratory. It's not shaping up to be the kind of holiday that former President George H.W. Bush and his family probably wanted. He is in the hospital tonight in Texas. Correspondent Molly Hennenberg has an update on his condition tonight.
President George H.W. Bush may be spending Christmas in a Houston hospital after being taken there by ambulance Tuesday night due to shortness of breath, but an aide says he likely will be home by New Year's. Gene Becker, the chief of staff to the former president, said in a statement, quote, "The Bush family certainly appreciates all your prayers, love, and concern. This is not 2 years ago. It's a hiccup. He should come home in a few days." 2 years ago, the 41st president was hospitalized for 2 months because of a bronchitis-related cough and other medical issues. Shortness of breath is not unusual, doctors say, when a patient has Parkinson's disease, as the former president does.
He has a vascular form that affects his legs primarily, but you get a stiffness of your breathing muscles. So you get a lot of perceived shortness of breath in that situation. And they're always very, very cautious with President Bush.
Despite Parkinson's and the fact that he needs a wheelchair to get around, President George H.W. Bush has kept up something of an active lifestyle. He celebrated his 90th birthday in June by doing a tandem skydive. And he recently served as the coin toss captain at a Houston Texans football game. The White House says President Obama was informed of the former president's hospitalization and says Mr. and Mrs. Obama sent their, quote, good wishes to the former president and the entire Bush family during this holiday season. John?
Molly Henneberg for us tonight. Molly, thanks so much. The hits just keep on coming. The Dow gained 6 to close at another record high today after an abbreviated trading session. The S&P 500 was down a fraction. The NASDAQ was up 8. One of President Obama's nominees for a senior legal position at the Pentagon could be derailed by accusations of stealing CIA documents. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen is here tonight with this fascinating story. So what senior Pentagon-level job was Alyssa Starzak up for, and where does that nomination stand as of now?
Well, John, good evening. She's formerly an attorney for CIA and for the Defense Department, and now Alyssa Starzak has been nominated by the Obama administration back in July to serve as general counsel to the Army. Sources tell Fox News that Starzak was one of the majority staffers on the Senate Intelligence Committee who was privately accused by that panel's Republicans and by career intelligence officers of having improperly read and printed out a classified, privileged CIA document. The incident allegedly occurred when Starzak and her colleagues were reviewing millions of CIA documents at a secure facility in Northern Virginia while researching the Intel Committee's recent report on CIA treatment of detainees. The secret document in question is the so-called Panetta Review, an internal assessment of CIA's conduct prepared by the agency's then-director, Leon Panetta. And our Fox News producer, Jake Gibson, who broke this story, reached out to Starzak for comment. Did not hear back from her, John.
It sounds like the CIA, the way they're talking about this, believes that Starzak may have been involved in some sort of crime here. Is there a chance that this nominee may in fact be prosecuted?
Well, in fact, both CIA and the outgoing chair of the Intelligence Committee, Democrat Dianne Feinstein of California, have traded allegations of criminal conduct in this case, with Feinstein accusing CIA of hacking into her staffers' accounts to monitor their work, and CIA officials accusing the staffers of stealing the Panetta Review. The Department of Justice investigated both claims and declined to pursue prosecutions. Analyst Fred Fleitz is a 25-year veteran of CIA and the House Intelligence Committee.
I'm concerned that the document was stolen, but we're not sure who did that or when that happened. There's a difference of opinion over that. What concerns me is that she is an attorney who had a document that said attorney-client privilege, and she wasn't the attorney.
The Senate session expired last week without a vote on Starzak's nomination. Both the Army and the White House told us, John, that they have no information on whether Starzak will be renominated next year.
We have reached out, though. What are officials saying about that?
Well, John McCain is going to be the incoming chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He was traveling and couldn't be reached for comment.
All right, James, thanks so much. Have a Merry Christmas yourself.
You as well.
All right. Up next, throwing several $1 million of good money after bad and trying to recapture a terrorist. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. WDBD in Jackson, Mississippi, with the cleanup from a devastating tornado that killed 4 people in the southeastern part of the state, injured 20 others, and damaged several homes. The governor has declared a state of emergency. Fox 11 in Los Angeles with more ways to watch The Interview. Digital platforms such as YouTube and Google Play are offering the film for rent. This comes one day after Sony announced a limited theatrical release for the comedy about an assassination attempt against North Korea's leader. One theater in Vermont is offering free popcorn if you bring along a copy of the Constitution with you to the theater. This is a live look at Gretna, Louisiana from Fox 8 in New Orleans. There has been a shooting at the Oakwood Shopping Center there. Fox 8 reports 1 person was shot. There is no word on a condition. The mall is being evacuated. And that is tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.